Hello everyone and welcome to Total War Through the Ages. In this episode we're going to be continuing the Northern Offensive once again. In the meantime, we finally decide to get the legionary cohorts out of Narbu Martius, and as well as some of the auxiliaries from farther north. And we're going to be combining this into a kind of the beginnings of a new army, and I don't actually recall where we end up sending it. I initially was going to send it to the Iberian Peninsula, however, I believe I actually changed where their ultimate destination was. But as you see there, we lay siege to the first settlement on our path to conquering Iberia. Well, technically it's kind of the third one we've captured here, but it's the first one we're coming from the north, that is. We're also going to be bringing this general down. Yes, that's right, yeah, so this army, we do actually end up sending this back to our capital. As I mentioned previously, I kind of want to consolidate some armies near our capital in preparations for the Roman Civil War. Meantime, we also recruit some mercenaries there as well. Now, this really large army of the Spanish I was a bit concerned about, and I'll be quite honest, I have no idea what happened to it. It disappeared for like a turn or two, and then it pops up later, but it did not actually attack us like I thought it would. For whatever reason, it just decided not to attack us. I'm not going to complain, but it is a little bit odd. The army right there, we're going to end up sending that to the settlement northwest of Corduba, where we also have an army currently on a fleet, which we're also sending around there. Yeah, that is this fleet right here. It's, of course, transporting an army, and we're going to be landing it just west of this settlement, and we will be taking it, though we are going to wait till the army from Corduba is able to be brought up as well. Seeing as how the army that we landed from the fleet only has Princeps primarily. I don't think they have any. They might have one or two early legionaries. Speaking of early legionaries, we're going to be reforming this army here. Or rather, we're going to be forming this army up. Not reforming, but we're going to be continuing on the offensive. Now, this army is going to be very important, both for this episode and for next episode as well, and we'll see why shortly. Meanwhile, back in the capital, we finally got to where we can recruit urban cohorts, which is... they're one of the best, if not the best, heavy infantry in the game. So we can now recruit them at our capital, which is pretty awesome. Meanwhile, that army there, yes, we do end up sending it back to our capital. Now, this army I was initially going to potentially send against the Gauls, but I opted to just go and reinforce the army already laying siege. So we head it on over that way, and we will eventually be fighting the Gauls as well, because they only have one province left. And now this fleet we are going to be sending... so I don't actually recall what we do with that fleet. That's the fleet, yeah. This fleet right here, our larger fleet, we're going to start sending it around into the English Channel to land an army over on the British Isles. Speaking of the army to land on the British Isles, we are now going to start forming that army based out of troops that relatively limited troops we have left in the north here. So as you can see, I'm kind of consolidating a lot of the legionary cohort units back to full strength, and we're going to be sending all of them. I initially was going to send that weak one back down to be replenished, but I remember that I had another unit over to the a bit east, so we end up combining that. And in addition to getting those armies formed, we also are going to start, and as you see there, I was taking a glance down just to see kind of what forces the Senate had. Again, we're still a ways away from being able to march on Rome, but it is something I definitely have started to think of it in terms of the campaign. So here we are bringing this army around, and like I said, these guys are going to be the stars of this episode. Partly because they get attacked. And this will be, of course, taking us into the first battle. Now, the main thing to keep in mind here is that I only have early legionaries and auxilia. I have no cavalry. And quite frankly, it's very different playing without any cavalry. I mean, technically we have my general's unit, which I do actually use fairly effectively in this battle. But it did take a little getting used to the idea of like not having cavalry, because usually I have at least 2 units of cavalry in addition to my general, and I usually have them set up on the flanks to cover the flanks partly, as well as to, of course, get around the enemy and get some flank charges in. But we don't really have those. So with my generals, I did initially contemplate deploying my general to one side or the other, but I did want to keep them kind of more centralized, so that to basically be able to rally our troops, and also I didn't know where I'd need him the most, so I wanted him to be able to move over to the left or the right, depending where he was most needed. Now here what we basically do is, obviously, as you saw, I'm in the standard checkered pattern. So what I end up doing is I basically just pull back my left side slightly and kind of start rotating the rest of my force around. And as you'll see, I bring up all the forces on the left. So I'm kind of just turning the line a bit by pulling back the units on the far left and pushing up the units on the right. And then the center just kind of shifts us very slightly. And so here we have the enemy are kind of coming at us a little piecemeal, which I'm not going to complain about. In fact, one of their units, I believe, actually routes itself just by charging one of our guys. Yeah, that unit right there just charged our unit of Auxilia and then just ran. So we didn't even have to do anything there. But overall, they actually did charge in pretty scattered, and you might be able to notice slightly into the forest they actually have quite a few units coming around on the left in the forest. I didn't actually spot those initially during the battle. Now I did spot them right there, and as you can see I slightly adjusted for them, but they almost got some troops around my left flank. So apparently that's something that's happened in the past couple episodes. I've almost missed enemy units coming around my left flank, so I do need to keep an eye on my left flank from now on. But overall, we actually win pretty handily here. This battle was not very close at all. Pretty much half, almost half, actually no, over half, I should say. Sorry, over half of their army is currently routing. And at this point, it's more or less just a mopping up operation and running down the last of the units that are still alive. That said, we do take some casualties. Not a lot, but we do take a decent number of casualties, though thankfully they were fairly evenly spread out among our troops. So there was it wasn't like one or two units took the brunt of the fighting. Pretty much everyone took, there were a few casualties here and there on all of our units, which in one sense is better than having just a couple units take the brunt of it. So... And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for this battle. It was pretty straightforward, and as you see, we finish up there. And we only lost, not that many guys. Yeah, not that many guys. We almost lost not that many. Meanwhile, back in continuing on with the Iberian conquest, we have the Second Army almost over to there, but meanwhile, on the far west, we have our two armies now setting siege here, which we will be taking care of in 2 turns, I believe. I believe I end up waiting 2 turns to get more of the rams completed. And again, sending this fleet over as we are compiling the army to get the invasion force for the British Isles ready. So, and I actually am able to send 2 different armies. It takes me a while to get the second one formed up, but I'm really glad that I do, because it ended up being very beneficial, and that was my plan. Is I wanted to try and get 2 armies sent over so that we could capture Londinium right off the bat with the first army, and then the second army could immediately push forward with an offensive to take over the rest of the British Isles. Now, in fact, I think this army right here might be the one that we end up sending. Again, I do apologize, I don't recall, but we're mopping up quite a bit of rebel forces. In fact, that's also what I'm doing far to the south. The army that came from Narbu Mardius ends up mopping up a lot of the forces. But it's battle time once again. That is right, we get attacked again. The same army gets attacked again by the Britons. Now, this battle, obviously, as you can see, they have 2 armies coming against us. This first army here, that first army there didn't have any chosen swordsmen. This one has 1 unit, which I think only has it's not full strength either, so it's pretty beaten up. So they don't really have any chosen swordsmen, which is great, because the chosen swordsmen are the main unit that gives our early legionaries problems. But they do have 2 armies, and they're decent sized armies. Now, they don't outnumber me by a lot, but I do believe in fact, I'm actually not sure if they did outnumber me a little bit, but each army of the enemy armies on its own had fewer men than we did. So again, and I'm going to be very aggressive here to try and deal with the first army before the reinforcements come up. As you saw there, I deployed in my standard checkered pattern. It's not mine, it's actually the Romans did that a lot, actually, and it's pretty common from what I've heard in Rome Total War to kind of do that staggered line. In fact, it was recommended to me by a friend. So as you saw there, initially I wasn't able to deploy perfectly because the unit of Auxilia in the middle was a bit far back, but we did get that adjusted, and now we're just moving up. Like I said, moved up fairly quickly because I want to engage with the army that is already on the field fairly early, so that we can deal with it before the reinforcing army can be brought to bear. Now, this battle has one of my favorite I think it's one of just the coolest, most cinematic moments coming up here. Right here. I just absolutely loved this shot of the two armies advancing again towards each other in the woods. It reminded me actually of the opening battle from the film Gladiator starring Russell Crowe. Of course, it's a really good movie, though not entirely realistic when it comes to the depictions of how the Romans fought battles. But it's still a cool opening to the movie, and this really reminded me of that. So here we have and you can see I'm hovering over the pause button. That's because I was waiting till the Britons actually fully committed to a charge, and then I was going to pause it immediately to be able to get my counter charges off. So I wait. Once I see they're committing to the charge, I then pause and counter charge. I skipped all of that stuff, going back into when I pause it again. And we have the counter charges. Now, one thing I will say, our right flank over here was a bit weak. That's mainly because the enemy forces actually had 1 or 2 units of chosen swordsmen. So yeah, actually, I believe I was wrong. I believe at the start of this I said that they didn't have any chosen swordsmen. They did have 1 or 2, maybe even 3 units of chosen swordsmen. So they have some of their heavier infantry on the far right, which kind of gave me problems. Now on the left here, I kind of am able to get around. They kind of split their forces up a little too much, so I'm able to kind of start being able to flank around them on their left flank. However, on my right, kind of on my right towards the center, 1 unit is already routing, and they do have some chosen swordsmen here. Luckily, I'm able to bring up this reserve unit there, but I was concerned about on the far right, that 1 unit of early legionaries was engaged with an enemy unit of chosen swordsmen. Right here, the enemy, I actually believe this is the enemy king, who is the general of this army, but he charges in, gets engaged, and I charge my general in, pull him back out, and now I'm charging him back in again. And as you can see, how I was concerned about that unit on the far right, but I don't have much time to worry about it. And I'm pulling my general out again to then charge in, and the units on our far left, we are now being able to swing in here to get in on the flank of those units on the left. And then the enemy center starts to collapse, but their right holds on for quite a while. And that's one thing I will say in this battle. The enemy's right side actually held out for pretty long. Yeah, and there we go. We killed the enemy king, which is pretty nice. And at this point, I start... well, I kind of, like I said, they really held on for a long time there on the right flank. But at this point, I also started shifting all the rest of my army over to out of the forest towards the left, as you see the enemy army coming up. So we're going to start kind of getting the rest of these guys deployed and ready to meet the second army. Because again, it can never be easy. We can never just actually. It is usually fairly easy against the AI, but you know what I mean. We had to fight one army off. Now we got to fight another one. Now this is this army's second battle in two turns in a row, but don't worry, it gets worse. Trust me. Here we have my army getting set up, and we're finally able to bring these 2 units from the far right that were fighting those chosen swordsmen for a long time. I have to say, I'm pretty impressed by how long the chosen swordsmen held out on the left side. Meanwhile, we also have I sent 1 unit of auxilia off to chase down the fleeing enemy army, just to try and keep them routing. And really interesting thing, I don't know why, but this is like the 2nd or 3rd battle that I've seen the AI charge their chariots straight in. And it's interesting because I hadn't seen them do that previously. Like when I first started fighting the Britons earlier on in this series, they didn't send their chariots in until after their infantry was engaged, and then they would have their chariots come in, usually on the flanks. But recently, it seems like they've been changing their tactics and have been prioritizing not prioritizing, but they've kind of just stupidly been charging all their chariots in before they have any infantry support. Now, this 1 unit of auxilia over here, I had noticed that the 2nd unit of chariots that the reinforcing army had was being sent after them, so I caught that in time to go over and try and have the unit kind of about face and charge and counter-charge the chariot unit. However, I do not recall if they actually won that fight or not, so we'll kind of have to keep an eye on it here. It's that unit of auxilia, which I believe is on the bottom row there, the last unit in the army. But the enemy infantry finally starts getting engaged, but again, they're very scattered. And I don't know what's up with the AI, but it seems like it would have been better for them to kind of rally up and then attack as one instead of being, they literally have like 4 units in the back that aren't even close to engaging with me, or close to it having been engaged with me. But again, I'm not really going to complain because it does make the battles a bit easier. But here we go. We're coming to the end of this battle and the end of this episode as well. But just to finish things off, we did of course conquer the army. I skipped over a lot of that because it was pretty much more of the same. But yeah, we're just running them down to finish them off. However, as I said, that is the end of this episode. So, thank you all for watching, and be sure to check back every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. And as always, thanks for watching. Wait, hold on. I screwed up that outro. Dang it, I screwed up the outro. I actually think this is the second episode in a row I screwed it up. Either way, thank you all for watching. Until next time.